Guys, welcome back, and we are discussing taxation with respect to taxation. In the first video, we discussed basic concepts of taxation, which are related to types of taxes, direct taxes, and indirect taxes, and then what is tax evasion, tax avoidance, tax planning, tax management, and few constitutional articles which talks about tax. Okay, with that basic background, if you have not gone through that video, I request you to please go through that video and come here for a continuation. Okay, and in this video I will be covering direct tax regime, basically income tax act. There are other direct taxes which are gift tax and wealth tax, but the focus as per our syllabus here is only on income tax act. Remember guys, income tax act is a very vast subject where people study for 100 200 marks, right? But here it is just a one unit. I tried to concise this entire concept of income tax in next 1 to 2 hours of 1 to 2 hours of a video, but it will be more focused on giving a clarity on a subject rather than working on few numerical examples, like how the professional course students of CA or CWA, CMA or a BCom and MCom, they'll be doing it. Here I'll be giving a brief meaning and concept understanding, but will not focus more on a problems number, like how to calculate salary income, what are the exemptions under that, and what is the final tax liability. All those things we will not discuss. We will touch upon all the aspects of income tax act here. Okay, on the first set we will talk about a few basic we talk about income tax framework, what are the rules and acts which are exist in India for income tax, governing the income tax, and then key definitions like person, assessee, income, previous year, assessment year, etc. And then what is the residential status, and based on residential status how the taxes will be levied. Okay, this is the first set of introduction to income tax, and the next we will talk about what are the various income classification under income tax act: income from salaries, income from house property, income from business or profession, capital gains, and then income from other sources. So we'll go through those definition, what actually each of these income head considers, and after that we will talk about another important set here: set off and carry forward losses. Set off means if there is a loss in one of the area of income, like income from business there is a loss, and income from house of there is a profit. Can I set all these things together? So here profit of 10,000 and here I have a loss of 5,000. So can I deduct and say my net profit is 5,000 and I will pay tax on this? Okay, the same way I have a salary income of 25 lakhs and there is a business loss of 30 lakhs. Can I cancel all these things and say that net my loss is 5 lakhs? So can we do this? We can do to some extent. What can we do, that we will discuss in set off. Set off is means loss from one source and the income from other source. Can I set it off? And then carry forward of losses. For example, this year I earned a loss of 20 lakhs in business. There is a loss. Okay, 20 lakhs. I suffered a loss of 20 lakhs in 2019 and 20. And suppose in the 2021, when we do a business final income, if I get a 25 lakhs as an income, can I set off my previous year loss with this one? Is it possible? We will see that in carry forward of losses. Where all I can carry forward the loss, where all we have a right to set off the loss, that we will see. And next, incomes which are exempt from tax. Incomes which are exempt from tax. There are few incomes. Income Tax Act says if you are earning those incomes, then it is completely tax free. One best example is agriculture income. Agriculture income is completely tax free in India. And few income, if it is interest on PPF, PF and Sukanya Samruddhi Yojana or some tax free bonds. Okay, there are some, there's a big list of that incomes. If you are earning all these incomes, then it is tax free India. Okay, next, after you club all these 5 incomes, right, income tax is going to give you certain deductions, certain expenses or a certain savings are allowed. If you do savings up to 1,50,000, it is permissible deduction. If your income is 10 lakhs and if you are done a savings of 1,50,000 in whatever the stated category, then income tax authorities will consider that your income is only 8.5 lakhs. There is a big list of permissible deductions. 1,50,000 as savings and another 50,000 in NPS, another 50,000 in medical insurance. All these are permissible deductions under 6A. We will talk about that. Once we are clear with the basic concepts of this income tax, the next important aspect is how do we do our assessment and who will collect who is the authority to collect the taxes, who will appoint them, what is their powers and functions, then how do we file a tax returns, what is the refund of tax, if extra tax is paid then how do we get it back, and if there is any appeals and other thing, what is the steps, and what are the offences under Income Tax Act and what are the penalties for it. Those things we will see. So as I said earlier, it is a very vast area. We will go one by one slowly and we will give a more focus on explaining a subject functionality of each and every area. We will not work out any problems for this. Okay. Guys, we are here now, Income Tax Act framework. We will go through that. The first and fundamental framework, like first and fundamental contributor for this entire income tax is Income Tax Act 1961. This is a mother document for all the income tax related provisions and process. Okay. Under this act only, government is charging a tax to public. Okay. So it as usual, every act gives an entire detail about that, the purpose of the act and what all are the components of, on what all incomes we have to levy the tax, how do we administer that, how do we collect the tax, if there is a delay from the people, how do we recover those taxes. Everything is stated in this Income Tax Act. Clear? This is the mother document for levying an income tax in India. After that, right, whenever there is an act, there should be some rules and procedures. You know Indian Penal Code, then we have criminal procedures and then civil procedures. So same way, income tax rules is a procedural part of it. Income tax rules 1962 is going to give a detailed procedure for each and every steps within income tax process. Okay, who has given this income tax rules? It is given by CBDT, and section 295 of the IT Act empowers CBDT to frame the rules. Okay, and next, government notification. So there will be a time from time to time, central government and state government will be issuing a notification related to income tax. Generally, for related to income tax, it will be issued by central government in India. And then Finance Act. This is the most important. Okay, the Income Tax Act passed in 1961. After that, there will be some amendments, and then income tax rules was given in 1962. After that, there will be some amendments. But Finance Act, which comes every year. Okay, every year, like on the 1st of February, Finance Minister will be presenting an annual budget. In that, there will be a section for income tax. Okay, once this finance bill is approved by a president, then it will be called as a Finance Act. In this budget, annual budget, right, there will be a section for income tax, and where the finance minister will be giving any changes or anything like on the rates of income tax or some exemptions. So any modification in the process of income tax, everything will be published as part of Finance Act. Okay, and then circulars and clarifications which is issued by Central Board of Direct Taxes. The Central Board of Direct Taxes will be keep issuing some circulars and notifications. The purpose for this is to give a clarification on any doubts. So the purpose of circulars and notification is to give a clarification or a doubts, clarify the doubts. Especially these circulars will be binding on assessing officers. It is for income tax officers how to perform their duty and other thing, right? And if they have any clarification, then they will get it through circulars and notification, but it is nothing to do with assessees, the end user or end taxpayer. These circulars and notifications are not impacting much. It will impact only to income tax officials, assessing officers. So this is a broader framework, and this all governs the income tax system in India. Income Tax Act 1961, Income Tax Rules 1962, Government Notifications, Finance Act, which is nothing but an annual union budget, and then circular and clarification of central issued by Central Board of Direct Taxes. These all are going to govern my income tax practice in India. What are the, so now let's focus key definitions and then we will move ahead. Okay, the key definitions: previous year and assessment year. In India, we follow financial year system. So we don't start our year from 1st January to 31st December. This is called as calendar year. What is this? Calendar year. But in India, we follow financial year. For example, the current thing, 1st January 2019 to, 1st April to 31st March 2020. This is our financial year. And after this, the next financial year is 1st April 2020 to 31st March 2021. This is the another financial year. After this, another financial year will come, 1st April 2021 to 31st March 2022. This is the, so like this we go, always it starts from 1st April and ends on a 31st March of the next year. This is the financial year system which India is being followed. Okay, then question is, what is previous year? Previous year is a year in which income is earned. Okay, this is a year in which income is earned. It is called as a previous year. I will explain that. Okay, from a definition perspective, it is very easy to remember. The financial year in which income is earned is called as previous year. What is the assessment year? The financial year in which income earned in the previous year is taxed is known as assessment year. Take an example. Whatever the income earned here, okay, income earned in 2019, 1st April 2019 to 31st March 2020, whatever the income is earned here, okay, that will be taxed in 1st April 2020 to 31st March 2021. Okay, here it will be taxed. So now the previous year is this one. Because the income earning year is this is called as a previous year, and this is the assessment year because it is taxed year. Okay, so wherever we consider the income which is earned, that year will be called as a previous year, and where it is taxed, that year will be called as an assessment year. This is the one set. What is the previous year? Previous year is 1st April 2019 to 31st March 2020, and then assessment year for this is 1st April 2020 to 31st March 2021. So whatever the income earned here, it will be charged, taxed in this. Clear, guys? I don't want to confuse further, just to take this example. So previous year where income is earned, and assessment year where the income is taxed. Okay, you can write this particular example. The two important thing here which you have to remember, if the person, right, if any person is doing a business, he starts the business in the previous year. So if he starts a business on 25th October 2019, it is a starting of a new business. Okay, in this case for him the previous year is going to be 25th October 2019 to 31st March 2020. Whenever he starts the business, from that day onwards, for the first year the previous year period will be limited to this. Clear? If anybody starts a business during the previous year, and then the starting date will be the start date of the business as a previous year for him. Okay, starting date is going to be a start date of the business. At the same time, if any person closes the business before 31st March, like if anyone closes his business say 30th November, so in this case for them the previous year will be 1st April 2019 to 30th November. Clear? So because he is closing the business on 30th November, he will file his return and he will close his business on 30th November itself. He will not wait for till 31st March to come. Clear? This is about previous year. So next important definition is a person. Who will be considered as person? Section 2 subsection 31 says, under section 2 subsection 31, person includes, the term person includes an individual like you, me, or any individual person who is earning some salaries or who is getting some income and other things. So their person will be called as individual. And then HUF, it is a special form of a business which is prevailing in India, where a Hindu undivided family, the Karta will be running the business. Okay, you guys know about HUF. Then a company means any institution which is registered under Companies Act of 2013. Earlier it was 1956. Okay, and then partnership or LLP. So this is governs under Partnership Act of 1932. And then any association of person and a body of individuals, a group of people who comes together for some business, for a temporary business, then it is called as an AOP or BOI. So they also will be called as persons under Income Tax Act. And then local authority is nothing but a municipality or any other village panchayat or anything. Any local authorities will be also considered as person. See, if a local authority is doing some social service, that will not be taxed. If local authority is doing some commercial part, okay, if the local authority is having a property and they rent it out, commercial properties, BDA which rent it out, right, or a BBMP which is having some property which is renting it out. So in those cases that will be taxed. Otherwise, if it is a purely a service related thing, then they will not be taxed. And eighth, every artificial juridical person means any institutions which are registered under trust or some other and societies or anything, right? All these artificial juridical persons will be also considered as persons like temple, university, etc. So what is a person? Person includes any individual, HUF, a company registered under Companies Act, and then firm or association of person, body of individual, local authorities, and every artificial juridical person, take temple and universities. Next, assessee. See, little complicated part here, assessee, but let me put it in a simple way. Assessee means the person who pays income tax. Very simple. The person who pays income tax or any other money as a penalty or a interest, and which is payable under Income Tax Act. Okay. The person who pays a tax or any penalties or any interest under Income Tax Act is called as an assessee. Assessee includes deemed assessee. So question comes, what is deemed assessee? Generally, if I am earning an income, I have to make a tax payment. So I will become an assessee. Correct. Then what is a deemed assessee? Who is a deemed assessee? Deemed assessee is the one who will be treated as an assessee, but he is not an assessee, but he will be treated as an assessee under Income Tax Act because of some contractual nature. For example, if the guardian, if a minor is there, then guardian will be treated as deemed assessee. At the same time, if any person dies intestate without any agreement, without any will, in those cases, his legal heirs will be considered as a deemed assessee. If husband dies, the wife will be considered as deemed assessee. At the same time, if person dies with a will, with an executory document, then executor will be considered as deemed assessee. Right? So, based on some circumstances, the other than normal assessees will be considered as an assessee. Those will be called as deemed assessee under Income Tax Act. Okay, assessee includes normal assessees who pay tax or penalty or any fines under Income Tax Act, but it also includes deemed assessees. Deemed assessees means in case of a other party is not available, like in case of a intestate, death in intestate, or in case of a minor, or where the person dies with an will. In all these cases, the different persons will be considered as an assessees. Those are called as deemed assessees. So it is very clear that whenever government says assessee, it includes both assessees and deemed assessees. It was held in the case ITO versus Delhi Development Authority. Assessee includes both actual assessees and deemed assessees. Whenever they say assessee, it includes both actual assessees and deemed assessees. Hope you guys are clear who is a deemed assessee and who is an assessee. Okay, what are the sources of income according to Income Tax Act? They have classified incomes under 5 groups: income from salaries, income from house property, income from profit and gains from a business or profession, capital gain, income from other sources. We talk about all these things in next video. So for a time being, you know that, you remember that income includes income from salaries, where employer-employee relation should be there, employer and employee relationship. House property, any kind of a rent which is received from a letting out of an house property is called as income from house property. And when person does any business, right, profit or loss he gets from a business, so that will be called as business income. And capital gains is nothing but a selling of a fixed assets. Okay, selling of a fixed assets. I purchase house and sell it after 5 years or 3 years. I purchase some property, land, I sold it. I purchased some gold and then I sold it. All these kind of an asset sales will come under capital gains. And finally, if anything is not falling under these 4, generally it will fall under income from other sources like tuition fee earning, royalties, okay, any other earning, some bank interests, anything which is not falling under above 4 categories will be part of income from other sources. We will talk about this in detail later. And the most important part of Income Tax Act is agriculture income, because any income earned because of agricultural activity is exempt from tax. Remember guys, any income from agriculture is exempt from tax. So because India is an agricultural economy and they want to boost the agriculture, so any income earned from agriculture land is called as agricultural income. We will see what all are the what is agriculture income. So as I said, under section 10(1), agriculture income is exempt from tax. So no tax on agriculture income. So what is agriculture income means? Any rent or revenue derived from a land which is situated in India and used for agriculture purpose. For example, you have a agriculture land 5 acres and you give it to a rent to a farmer. He will give you 5 lakh rupees. So this is tax free. Any rent you receive because of an agriculture land, and this farmer is doing some agricultural activity on that land. So in that way, this is exempt. So agriculture income includes any rent or revenue derived from the land which is used for agriculture purpose. Next, any income derived from such land by agriculture operations. I have 5 acres land and I am doing tea, or I am growing a crops. I am growing a crop. Any income because of an agriculture operations, if I am going to get it, then that is tax free. I will grow a crops and then sell it in a market and I get some money. So that income is exempt from tax. Any income attributable to a farmhouse subject to a satisfaction of certain conditions. If you have a farmhouse in that particular area, in that agriculture land, and you get some rental income because of you giving it for harvesting or some anything, so that will be considered as agriculture income. And at the same time, if you are selling saplings, trees or a seedlings, etc., as a nursery, that also will be termed as agriculture income. Clear guys, what is all agriculture income? Any rent, if you are growing a crops or something, whatever revenue you get is agriculture income. Any income on a farmhouse with certain exemptions, and selling a seeds or a saplings also will be called as agriculture income. Okay. So what are the preconditions to call it as an agriculture income? There should be some land. Okay, there should be some land. I cannot say that I am doing buying a grocery and selling it. It is an agriculture business. No, that is again a sales. Okay, if I am growing it on the land, then only it will be considered as agriculture activity. So the person's activity will be determined if there is a land. Ownership is not important. I can take a land on a rent and I can do agriculture, and the income is tax free, but there must be a land, and that land should be used for agricultural operations. I have a land, but if I am using it for some factory, then it will not be called as agriculture. I have to use it for agriculture operation. What is agriculture operation? Seeding, growing, cutting, and then transporting, right? Some of these activities should happen there. Otherwise, it is not a agriculture income. So there should be some agricultural operation. And cultivation of land is must. So you have a land and you are using it for something directly as a processing unit, no, then it is not a agriculture. So cultivation is important. And all these things, ownership is not essential. You can take it on a rent and do it, but ownership is not essential here. Okay, if all these things satisfies, then it will be called as agriculture income. Few examples of agriculture income. You may get 10-mark question. What is agriculture income and what are the preconditions for it, and give some examples, right? So this is what you have to write. Okay, so these are the agriculture incomes which are considered. Income from sale of a replanted trees. You planted some trees, so you got some income. So that's fine. It is agriculture income. Rent received from agriculture land. If you have agriculture land, renting it out, and whatever you get is tax free. Income from growing flowers, creepers, whatever is grows, right? Like if you start selling the flowers from the land, right? So that is also an exempt. Share of profit of a partner from an agriculture operations. You have 5 guys who comes together and form an agriculture land, and you do some business and you do some cultivation and take a profit out of it. So that is also exempt. Interest on capital received by a partner from a engaged in agriculture operations. So your 5 members are partner, you have contributed capital and started an agriculture business, and whatever interest you take on your capital is also exempt from Income Tax Act and is also considered as agricultural income. Incomes derived from seeds, saplings, etc. is also a agriculture income. So these are few examples which I am quoting here, and these are the examples which are not considered as agriculture income. Though it happens on a land, it will not be considered as agriculture income. Remember, poultry farming is not a agriculture activity. Beehiving is also not a agricultural activity. And in the land, you have not done any cultivation, some extra trees grown up there and you cut it up and sell it. So then it is not a agriculture income. Remember, there should be a cultivation activities. If something randomly or spontaneously grown in your area and if you are selling it, then it is not a agriculture income. Income from dairy farming. If you are doing a dairy farming in a land, then it is not agriculture. Agriculture means there should be a cultivation, there should be a growth of a crops or flowers, etc. Otherwise, it is not agriculture. Poultry farming, beehiving or a dairy farming is not a agriculture thing. And then purchase of a standing crop. Most important, somebody has grown the crop. Okay, I will go and buy it and then I will take it and sell it to someone. So then that is not a agriculture income. Okay, a person, farmer here, he is already grown the crops. Okay, the crop is ready for harvest and the broker, he goes and purchases this and sells it in a market. So this is a brokerage. The income of broker is not agriculture income. Okay, it is not agriculture income. The income of a farmer, for him it is agriculture income, but for broker, if he purchases standing crop and sells it, it is not agriculture income. Clear? This is a normal business income for him. Okay, so buying anything standing crop is not a agriculture income. Royalty income from mines. You have a land, you have given it for mining and then you get a royalty income for that. So in that case, that is not a agriculture income. So only if there is a cultivation, crops growing, then only it will be considered as agriculture income, otherwise it is not. These all are not the case of agriculture income, poultry farming, beehiving, dairy farming or standing crop or mines. Okay guys, hope you are clear what is agriculture income, what all it includes, what are the preconditions and what are not agriculture income is. Okay, the last topic to end our discussion is residential status. Guys, you focus here. I hope it is already it is a lengthier video. I don't want to make a 10-15 minutes video and put on hundreds of videos on YouTube. So I have taken little lengthier time because I need to cover many things. So I want to cover everything in 3 to 4 videos with respect to a direct taxes. So I have included residential status also here. Bear with me. I will be closing it in next 10 minutes. Okay. So what is residential status? It is not a citizenship of any country. Remember guys, we are talking only from an income tax perspective and it is nothing to do with citizenship of a country. A American citizen, if he comes and stays in India for more than 182 days, he will be called as a resident. Okay, so that's why don't confuse with the citizenship of a person and the residential status. These two are two different things, residential status and citizenships. American citizen can be resident as per Income Tax Act if he stays in India for more than 182 days. Right? So it is nothing to do with person's citizenship. It is all depends on number of days person stays in India, whether he is an Indian citizen or a foreign citizen. Okay, based on the categories, they have made three categories generally: resident and ordinary resident, resident but not ordinary resident, and non-resident. And based on this, the tax will be imposed on a person. Why residential status will be calculated or find out? It is based on the residential status, the taxes will be levied. There are three classifications for individual and HUF. Resident, ordinary resident, resident but not ordinary resident, and non-resident. All the three are applicable for individual and HUF. For company and firm, only two. One is resident and the second one is non-resident. Okay. Remember guys, residential status is nothing to do with the citizenship of a country. It is all depends basically only on the number of days the person stays or a control of the business. Only on these two things the residential status will be calculated, found out, and the purpose is based on the residential status the tax will be levied. How, we will see it later. So the based on the residential status, the taxes will be levied, which is called as an incidence of tax. So residential status and incidence of tax. Based on the residential status, the taxes will be levied. For individual and HUF, the three residential statuses are there: resident and ordinary resident, resident but not ordinary resident, and non-resident. This is applicable for both individual and HUF. For company, firms and any other kind of persons, only to resident and non-resident. Okay, let's see first individual, then we will see about when we will discuss about Hindu undivided family, company and firms. Okay, very important. I have given everything in one page here. For individual, we know three statuses will be applicable: resident ordinary, resident not ordinary, and non-resident. How do we find out? There are three conditions here. Based on these three conditions, we will identify whether that person is a resident ordinary, resident not ordinary, or non-resident. Okay, what is the first condition? In a previous year, a person should be in India for 182 days or more. This is the condition 1. Very simple condition. If a person is there in India, first you have to check whether the person is there in India for 182 days or not. That is the first condition. Coming to second condition. Person should be in India for 60 days or more during the previous year. 60 days in previous year and 365 days in the 4 years preceding the previous years, immediately preceding the previous year. In the previous year 60 days and prior to that, out of 4 years, he should be there in India for 365 days. Condition number 2. What is the first one? 182 days in a previous year, simple condition. Second condition, he should be in India for 60 days in a previous year and 365 days preceding to 4 years preceding to previous year. Okay, 4 years preceding to previous year. If he is there for 365 days, then it will be said that condition 2 is satisfied. Clear guys? Condition 1 and 2. These two are very important. Based on this, we will classify person whether resident or not, resident or non-resident. Okay. If any one of the basic condition, any one of these condition 1 and 2 is satisfied, then it will be called as a resident. If any one is satisfied, then person will be called as a resident. But whether it is an ordinary resident or a not ordinary resident, that again depends on certain other condition. But any one of the condition is satisfied, then the person will be called as resident. If both the things are not satisfied, if he doesn't satisfy any of these two conditions, then he will be called as non-residents. Understood guys? Resident means he should satisfy any one of the condition, 1 or 2. Non-resident means he will not satisfy any conditions, either 1 or 2. Finish. Then comes the question of a condition 3. This one is to identify whether the person is ordinary resident or not ordinary resident. Okay. So, if any person who satisfies condition 3, what condition 3 says? He should be resident for 2 out of 10 years, immediately a previous year, immediately preceding previous year. Immediately this preceding previous year, he should be like out of 10 years, he should be resident for 2 years. Means out of 10 years, he should have satisfied any one of the conditions for 2 years minimum. And he should be in India for 730 days in 7 immediately preceding years. Preceding years. So, he should be there in India for 730 days in the 7 previous years, and at least 2 times he should be resident. If these 2 are satisfied, condition 3 is satisfied, then the person will be called as ordinary resident. If the condition 3 is not satisfied, then the person is called as not ordinarily resident. Clear? If a person satisfies condition 1 or 2, he will be termed as a resident. If a condition 3 is satisfied, then he will be treated as ordinary resident. If condition 3 is not satisfied, then resident, not ordinary resident. And condition and 1, 2 are not satisfied, then the person will be called as non-resident. I try to put it in most simplest way, but please listen it or read it. You will be understanding this concept: resident, resident ordinary, resident not ordinary, and then non-resident. Clear? So, as I said earlier, based on the residential status, the taxes will be levied. Okay. A resident and ordinary resident. If a person is resident and ordinarily resident, then all of his income will be taxed, whether he earned in India or outside India. Okay. Any income he earns in India or outside India is taxable for him. So, it is not a benefit being a resident here. If you are a non-resident or resident but not ordinarily resident, then only income which is earned in India is taxable. If the person is earning something in a foreign, that is not taxable. Clear? It is all at very high level, guys. There are many other sections and many other case studies around it, but from a high level, in case of a resident, ordinarily resident, all the incomes, whether earned in India or earned outside India, is taxable to a person. But in case of non-resident and resident not ordinarily resident, then only income earned in India is taxable, but income earned in other country, there is no need to pay tax in India. Clear on individual? The 3 classification: the resident ordinary, resident not ordinary, non-resident. To call it as a resident ordinary, you should satisfy any one of the basic condition, condition 1 or 2, and then condition 3 is a must. To call it as a resident not ordinary, any one of the basic condition, condition 1 or 2. If he satisfies, then he will be called as resident not ordinary. And non-resident, if he is not satisfying any one of the basic condition, condition 1 and condition 2, done, he will be treated as non-resident. Taxability: for resident, ordinarily resident, any income in India or outside India is taxable. For non-resident and resident not ordinarily resident, okay. So, non-resident and resident not ordinarily resident, income earned in India, outside India is tax. Income earned outside India is not taxable. Hope I was clear. Go through this 1 or 2 times and then we will be clarified on this. Next, it is all about HUF. Okay. So in case of HUF, the residential status will be considered based on the control and management, based on the control and the management of the HUF unit. How that HUF family business is managing, who is controlling it, from where it is controlling is important. If it is controlled only in India, generally who manages the HUF? Karta. If Karta is in India and he managing the entire business, then it will be called as a resident. If it is outside India, if the Karta or the person who manages the business is living in outside India, then it is called as non-resident. And if it is partly in India, partly outside India, person will be keep coming here, they manage from here, again they go back there, whatever. In that case, it is again resident. But as we discussed, in HUF, we have three classification: resident, ordinarily, resident not ordinarily, and then non-resident. Correct? So we have three classification: 1, 2 and 3. So based on the control, we can classify person whether resident or non-resident. If control is only from India, then resident. Partially in India or partially from outside, then also resident. If it is completely outside India, then non-resident. To further classify whether it is an ordinary resident or not ordinary resident, it will be based on the residential status of a Karta. Okay. To call it as an ordinary resident, Karta should be resident for 2 out of 10 years, and then the condition number 3, whatever we read, right? 730 days or more during the 7 years immediately preceding the previous year. If Karta is satisfying these two conditions, then he will be called as an ordinary resident. If Karta is not satisfying this, then he will be termed as not ordinarily resident. To call it resident, the control should be from India or partly from India. And further, to call it ordinary, then both the conditions should be satisfied by Karta. Otherwise, it will be termed as not ordinary resident. Hope you guys are clear with the residential status of HUF. Next, for companies, for any other businesses, only two residential status, whether resident or non-resident. Okay, in case of companies, we have two classifications now. One is Indian company and foreign company. What is Indian company? The company which is registered in India. Correct? Any company which is registered according to Indian Companies Act. Foreign company which is established outside India at a high level. Right? So, Indian company and foreign company. But again, the classification for them, right, with a residential status, where they can be a resident or non-resident. It all depends on control and management. Control and management. Who is controlling, from where it is controlling. So, if the controlling is completely in India, then the firm is called as a resident. Okay. If a control is completely from India, within India, then it is called as a resident. If the control is completely outside India, in that case, Indian company, it will be called as a resident only. So, for Indian company, it is always resident. Okay. For foreign company, if the control everything is outside India, then it is called as a non-resident. If it is partly in India, partly outside India, for Indian company, it is again resident only. For foreign company, it will be considered as non-resident. How residential status is determined for company? It is solely based on the control and management. If the control is outside India, within India, both Indian company and foreign company will be considered as a residents. If the control is only outside India, then only Indian company will be considered as resident and foreign company will be considered as non-resident. In case of control is partly in India, partly outside India, then Indian company will be considered as a resident, but foreign company will be considered as non-resident. Clear, guys? In case of firms and others, it is always if it is controlled in India, then resident, outside India, non-resident, partly in India and partly outside India, then it is a resident. That's it, guys, about residential status. Little confusing, but you just again go through 1 or 2 times this video, you will be get clarified on what is a residential status. And always the taxes will be based on the residential status. If it is a resident, then income earned in India and outside India is taxable. If it is a non-resident, income earned in India is only taxable. So you go through this clearly 1 or 2 times, then you will come to know what actually it is. I try to brief concise this entire big topic into one hour lecture here. I hope you got all the required information with respect to direct tax regime basic concepts, and in the next class we will talk about the income sources, the classification of income, what all it covers in detail. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. I request you to please subscribe my channel and also spread this with your friends. Thank you very much.